Can we just speak to, I don't know, I don't think we can give enough love to Blizzard. It's a legendary company. For me personally, for everybody, for millions of people, created some of the greatest games ever. Warcraft, StarCraft universe, Diablo, WoW, Overwatch. What made it such a legendary game company? Just looking back at the whole of it.
The start is Mike, Alan, and Frank. It was run by 3 gamers. They were all 3 of them programmers. They made the games before they just ran the company. So they knew what each of us as developers beneath them were going through, and they protected us. They shielded us from all of the nonsense. And even when they would align with a business person, they had a COO in the early days named Paul Sams. And Paul protected us. You know, they found great people who got it. The company, when I joined, was like 95% developers and like 5% operations. When I left, it was, 50-50, and that's like a 4,500 person company. That love of the games and the respect and good treatment for game developers really turned it into the place that it was. Just the commitment to excellence, the high quality bar, and then finding these passionate people like Chris Metzen or Sam Didier. They were like the visionaries of early Blizzard, Alan Adham, of just these worlds that we're still making and we're still playing in today. Um, it was infectious and it was inspirational. And you wore the Blizzard blue with an esprit de corps. Like you felt proud to be part of it and you felt like you had made it to be there. And everything you did wanting to respect and honor those who had come before you. I know it sounds almost cheesy saying it that way, but it really had that sense of reverence. Like you knew you were part of something special. You didn't take it for granted.
Yeah, that's the sense. Reading everything, that's the sense I got. Everybody that was a part of it, that truly, truly, truly honored that time. Just to take a small slice, what were some of the brain? So you mentioned Chris Metzen. You gave so much love to so many people on the team, but I got to ask about Chris Metzen, who I would, by the way, love to do a podcast with at some point. What were the brainstorming sessions with him like? It seems like those are pretty like awesome.
They were the best. Like you could walk into a room. Like the way I would work with Chris is early on when I was more junior, it was just sort of getting creative direction from him. Hey, Chris, I'm about to work on this zone called Westfall. What are your ideas? How could I capture them in gameplay? Well, that won't quite work. How about like this? It was more like that. Later on, like I still remember the first discussion I ever had with Chris about Wrath of the Lich King. I went up to his office like, hey, we're finally doing it. We're doing the Northrend expansion. What excites you about Northrend? And that's all you had to say. And he would draw a map and he'd start pulling up old like Warcraft 2 and Warcraft 1 manuals and, showing you like pictures he and Sammy had drawn and like maps and he all of it. He would just go on for an hour and then I would sort of digest. I just listen, taking constant notes. I'm photographing his whiteboards all the time. And then I go back and start to put those into design flow of like, okay, what's a zone? What's a dungeon? What could be cool? What should come first? What should come last? Lich King, for example, we wanted to try a very specific design to counter a problem we had in Burning Crusade, which is everybody entered through the Dark Portal, through Hellfire Peninsula. All the server programmers hate you because everybody loads into the same zone at the same time. Lich King, we split them up for better player flow. Plus, it's more interesting. The more choice you have, Sid Meier says games are a series of interesting choices. So we give him 2 starting zones, but that was the flow with Chris. And so often we would just like, okay, in that first meeting, Chris had put a zone called Grizzly Hills on the board. Well, I don't know anything about Grizzly Hills.
Mm-hmm.
hey, Chris, talk about Grizzly Hills. If you didn't interrupt him, he'd just go for an hour, and you have no idea how much of it, like, he had pre-thought about or had existed in previous lore, and how much of it he was just making up on the spot.
Mhm.
He's just that charismatic and captivating.
Creating these worlds and being able to
Yeah.
brainstorm through them and together. I mean, that is what you're doing. As a consumer of those worlds, you kind of take it for granted that they're incredible, but like you're crafting them. Like you're looking at a blank sheet of paper and then together coming up.
My job, as I saw it working with Chris, was I had to, on World of Warcraft, specifically working with Chris, is I was like the translator into gameplay of what Chris wanted, how to get it to play like how Chris wanted. So my favorite stories, we're working on Burning Crusade, and we're in this meeting, and Chris is like, he's the gentlest, sweetest guy, but because he carries himself with such confidence and everybody's in awe of him, the junior developers get kind of intimidated by him. So we're in this meeting and we're talking about Silver Moon City because we're introducing the Blood Elves. And Chris is like, in Silver Moon City, it's got the tallest fucking tower in all of Azeroth. I mean, it is the tallest thing. You know, it's mind blowing, the awe of it. Only the Blood Elves could build it. Fast forward like 2 weeks later, I'm walking through the hall and I see a bunch of level designers and artists. They're all like crowded around the screen. And on the screen, they've dragged Blackrock Mountain and Karazhan and the Stormwind Cathedral. I'm like, what the fuck are you guys doing? And they're like, well, Chris said that the Silver Moon Tower had to be the tallest thing in World of Warcraft.
Mhm.
And so we're measuring how tall all of these other things are so we can make the tower taller. And I'm like, guys, Chris doesn't know how tall the burning steps, you know, and the cathedral and Stormwind
Yeah.
is. What Chris means is just make the tower really fucking tall. You
Yeah.
don't need to measure it. And they're like, oh, okay. That's okay.
Yeah.
Like, are you willing to take the heat if he, I'm like, I'm willing to take the heat on this one, guys.
Yeah. It's just a feeling. It's a vibe.
It's a vibe.
Yeah. And I also just personally have to give all the love in the world for the current Diablo 4 team because I've spent most recently out of the Blizzard games, spent a huge amount of time in Diablo, and they've created some, and it's not just the loot. All right, it's the whole experience, the art, everything together, and the season they've created. They've created a really wonderful world. So I could feel how much effort goes into that.
They're crushing it. And I think Diablo 4 in like modern times is one of the best worlds that have built. And they understand Diablo players.
Mhm.
Like that community is so hard and so demanding. And that team is amazing.
Yeah, there's a lot of richness. It's like this is really. I mean, I don't know how often you get that, but it's really the perfect Diablo game. They've really like evolved a lot, grew a lot. So there's this whole mathematical component of just so many numbers everywhere, and it's all balanced really masterfully. And then, of course, you have to come up with new content with the seasons, and they figure out ways to do that. So, and a crazy pace,
Yeah.
and still make it super fun.
They're a great live team. Yeah.
And for me personally, like I said, the couch co-op experience has been really like that aspect of it is really great. Just all of it is one of the greatest games in recent history.